giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast. And here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Hey, we are back. And I'm not going to lie, we are recording this on the day after the election. Obviously, if you've been a fan any length of time, you know that this episode should have come out hours before it did. But it was a weird sort of week. Let's just leave it at that. So it's really ironic that this is the topic because I think that it's going to resonate on so many levels. And so the topic today is about building boundaries. And again, this is another question that came from a conference that I was speaking at. And it was specifically, how do I build boundaries to say no? Because I'm a yes girl and I want to be everything to everybody, especially after 37 years in, and I'm overwhelmed. So what would it take to say no? What does it mean would be better, my question. But here's the thing. Boundaries, and we're going to get into it, but boundaries come, or the need for boundaries, I should say, comes in a whole variety of ways. And sometimes the boundaries we need are with ourselves. Sometimes we just simply have to put boundaries in place for what we're willing to accept from ourselves, from what we're willing to allow ourselves to consume, because otherwise the world can be a scary place. You know, whether you're on social media all the time or whether you're dealing with something in your own community or whatever it is, the world is very amped up and there is a lot of drama everywhere. And so this has definitely given me a different bit of a perspective. I've done a lot of walks today. So that's something I want to say first and foremost, is that before we get into all the rest of it, I really want to focus on the boundaries you have for yourself, from yourself, to give yourself. So the question becomes, what do you actually do to take care of yourself? Because the problem is when you say yes to everything, you're really also simultaneously saying no to everything as well. Because every time you say yes, you are saying no to something else. We just don't always know what that is or recognize it as being such. But that is, in fact, what's happening. So we always have to know when we're saying yes to this, what opportunity are we saying no to? What piece of ourselves are we saying no to? Maybe you're overcommitting, doing this, that, or the other. Maybe you're saying yes to a client that you don't want to help. When you say yes to that client, are you taking away the time that you could be spending on the client you really want? When you're saying yes to doom scrolling on Instagram or watching every news article about the election and the aftermath, are you missing out on opportunities where you could be talking about your business, working on growing your business? What is it when you're saying yes to things, are you actually also saying no to? So let's get into this. So Zena is a phenomenal woman, and I had the honor of actually spending a lot of time with her at this conference. We ended up sitting down at the table and really and truly having a big in-depth conversation. And I'm not going to go into details as to what we talked about, but what I do want to do is bring to light some of the questions that came out of it and some of the thoughts, if you will, that I think need to be highlighted. So one of the biggest things is when we're a yes person to everything, it's really easy to get wildly overwhelmed without even thinking about it. And I have a coach. I have a business coach who has a saying, and it drives me crazy, but the reality is he's completely true. Overwhelm is a choice. Now, when the first time he said that or said it to me, I was fuming because it was not a choice. I did not have a choice. And as the time has gone on, I have realized that yes, it is actually a choice. Because when you say yes to this, you're saying no to something else. And when you are saying yes to this and yes to that, and you're saying yes to everything, holy crap, it's overwhelm. Well, guess what? You chose to say yes. See, overwhelm affects us at all stages of business. Have you ever told yourself, well, when I just get to this level, it'll be fine. When I just get so many clients, it'll be fine. When I just start making so much money, it will be fine. If I can just get this file booked, it will be fine. Have you ever lied to yourself by saying that? Because here's the problem, new level, new devil. Every yes is a no to something else. Boundaries is an easy word, yet hard AF to implement. Drives me crazy when they oversimplify it. Yet it needs to happen. It positively drives me mad when people are just, well, you need to have better boundaries. Yeah, well, you need to go take a long walk off a short pier. That's always how I felt about it. And then I realized that they might have oversimplified it and they might have had an attitude when they said it, but it was true. It was very true. Boundaries are what's going to help you. And see, when you start to feel guilty about things, you've got to question, is that because of the emotion you're putting in it? Or is it because you've let somebody else come past your boundaries to make you feel guilty? Question becomes, who is the boundary for? Is it for you? Do you need better boundaries for yourself? Do you need to have better boundaries where you cannot go watch television until you've done this? Do you need better boundaries for your own time management? Or is it your family? Is it making sure you have time to spend with your family? Is it your family not recognizing you actually have a job? You know, I think that's something that's really common with travel advisors or simply people who work from home. You know, there's a whole generation before us, multiple generations in cases, where working from home was never a thing. My parents don't get it. When I had an office, they got it. When I worked from home, they didn't. I opened an office. I had the same career. I went back to working out of an office, out of my home. Suddenly, I was busy. They understood that. Now I work from home again because I realized I wasn't using my office enough. There's that idea of, quote unquote, it's not a real job. Is that boundary a boundary of your time, or is it a boundary of your thoughts? Because it's one thing when they want your time, and that's frustrating enough. But it's when they want your time because they don't think what you do is real. Well, it's real and it's hard. And when you don't have people who understand what it is you're doing or the time it is you're putting in, that creeps into a whole other boundary. I kind of equated it. There was a time several months ago, my mother called me during a live. I think I was on a Zoom. I can't remember if I was on a Zoom or if I was on a Facebook Live, but whatever. She had already interrupted me multiple times that week, but that particular one to me was the deal breaker. And it was because she wanted me to do something in her banking app that even her bank couldn't do. So clearly I was not going to be able to do it. But to me, because it interrupted, it was sort of like my sister owns vet clinics. So she works in a vet clinic. And I just said to my mom, I said, if she was in there with a patient, would you just go barging in? Well, of course not. And I said, well, here's the thing. When you're calling me And admittedly, it was my fault for not putting my phone on do not like on flight mode, not putting it on flight mode. It's the same thing. So during these hours, you may text, you may not call unless it is a life and death emergency. Unless it is worthy of busting into the room while a patient is in there, you don't call. You have to have those boundaries. One, you need to make sure you're not being interrupted just because they want you to update their bank app or go pick up their cookies or go do whatever of these things. But also, two, so that they don't have the ability to undermine what it is you're doing. That they don't have the ability to give you a less than feeling. See, we want to surround ourselves with people who are going to lift us up, not question and tear us down. You also need to have boundaries for your clients. I have had a lot of conversations inside of Facebook groups lately where travel advisors are, well, what is your process? What is this? What is that? And so I will always say to them, well, what's your process? Well, it depends because I want to do it this way, but my clients won't because they prefer to do it this way. Well, here's the scoop. We can all have our own preferences, but ultimately when you go through the drive-through, what be Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever it is, they're going to tell you how it is that works because they have their process. And in order to be a client of theirs, you must fit within that process. Now, I am not saying that there is not ways in which you can flex and mold and create amazing service elements within that. But you also need to have a set of boundaries that you don't go past. Because if you let your clients know that you're going to respond to them at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, you cannot be upset when they call you, email, text you, and demand an answer at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. Is that the boundary that you've set? Is that when you want that time for your family? Or is that when you're going to give it to your clients? Because I promise you, you can't do both. It doesn't work. So what are the boundaries you're looking for? Are they physical? Are they emotional? Are they physical? Is it time? Is it you're not going to deal with clients between certain times? You're not going to deal with your family between certain times? Or is it the emotional because it's not a real job? Or you work for me. What is it? I heard a phenomenal saying and I wrote it down in this in my notes for this episode, but I was not smart enough to write down who it was. I want to say it was quite possibly James Wedmore that said it. That's going to be my best guess. But it said burnout is when your brain is saying yes and your soul is screaming no. See, if you don't have boundaries, you're going to keep saying yes to everything. Meanwhile, your soul is going to scream no. When I heard that explanation, it was the most powerful, clarifying example that I ever heard. Because when I went through my burnout, which again, to chase a squirrel, I always thought was for the weak. Turns out it was for the people that just simply don't take care of themselves. But that's exactly how it felt because my brain was like, oh, we got that. That's no big deal. We can totally do that. And my soul felt like a caged lion that just wanted to cry, didn't want any of it. So what kind of business are you building? What phase of that business are you in? You've got to set a boundary because if you are building a business that you have a vision for, you need to know what that looks like. But then you also need to understand what phase you're in. Because when you're in a startup, it's going to take a different type of energy. Notice I didn't say a different amount, but a different type. It's also going to take a different type of boundary. See, when you're first starting your travel business, you're not going to have as many clients as what you're going to have several years in. They're not going to be running on the same scale. But yet you're still going to be learning. You're going to be doing all these things. You're going to be doing a lot of things that nobody sees. And that's going to require a different type of boundary than all the work that everybody does see. What does your vision look like for a couple of years from now? What does that look like? So you want to make the decisions based on the vision of what you want to create, not from your current status or emotion. Maybe you're like Zena and you've been in the industry for decades. And in which case you've built up a massive book of business and you want to scale back because you want more time with your family. You want more time with this, that, the other. So in which case, which clients would you get rid of? And when I always say to people, well, what kind of clients would you get rid of? They're like, oh, I don't know. And so I said to them, okay, so let's say you woke up tomorrow and you were told you had to cut your business in half. Do you know what clients would go first? And without fail, they're always like, oh yeah. Said, great, let's start there. Because we want to look at the type of clients we would get rid of and the type of clients that we would be heartbroken to lose. And those ones we'd be heartbroken to lose, well, how do we get more of them? How do we take care of them? It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your business satisfaction, profits, and excitement are going to come out of 20% of your clients. Yet we spend so much time forgetting to set boundaries for that other 80%, and they're sucking the life out of us for only 20% of our business. It's not uncommon to have guilt about trying to help everybody when you're wanting to reduce. But we got to check the guilt at the door. I watch Dr. Jen Beecham. I think that's what her name is. I'll have to look it up on Instagram. And she is a pediatric emergency doctor in Florida. And she got quite Insta famous during all the hurricanes and other such. But she also does, she's just a content creator. But she said something the other day on a video. And so they're in the middle of moving yet again because of the hurricanes and this, that, the other. Their house has been destroyed once more. So they're going to be in a rental for a year. And so she was, a day in the life of. So she was showing how they're moving, how they're this, how they're that. And then she's like, okay, I got my Red Bull. I'm headed in and checked my baggage at the door. And then she goes in. And that was just it. She checked her baggage at the door. Because her clients, her patients have enough of their own baggage. They don't need her baggage. You've got to see where that guilt is and you've got to check it at the door. Just the same is desperation. Maybe you don't have the sales you want to be having. Maybe you're not where you want to be. Maybe you're struggling to get new inquiries and you're struggling to get people to stop ghosting you and all of this, that, the other. Well, guess what? When you come out and you are like desperate, we've all been to the bar where there's that super desperate person. You're like, oh, hell no. Hide me. You don't want to come off that way. And yet there is a lot of people in business that's exactly how they present. You don't want to be desperate and taking on a miserable client just so you have a client. Because I promise you, when you go out there with an energy of desperation, you are not attracting your ideal client. I remember for years, women would say, oh, I can't find Mr. Right. And there was one in particular. We had a long conversation one night. And she's like, I don't know. I date and I date and I date. And all I find is losers. And this is just terrible. And I looked at her, I said, then stop dating. But how will I ever find him? And I said, well, honey, you are so freaking desperate. Nobody wants that. Nobody. And after that conversation, she took a break. And guess what happened? She actually, not only did she take a break, she decided she was going to go out and buy herself her own home. She didn't need a man. She was going to go do this. So she went out, she bought a home. And on the day she was moving in, a friend of hers brought a buddy along to help move her. And lo and behold, less than a year later, they were married. It's funny when you stop trying to force things, how it happens. The same is true in sales. I don't know about you, but I've been around salespeople. I've been into stores where you can feel them coming for you because they so desperately need to hit quota, so desperately need the sale. I think that's the biggest problem with some of those MLM party plan things. And I think that's why a lot of those companies are going away from them. I just need to hit this many more sales and then I get this. So who's going to help me? Sales is not about helping the salesperson. Sales is about helping the person buying. How can you help your client? How can you be of service to them? How can you make it about them? Because when you make it about you, nobody wants that. The choices you make will determine what's possible, will determine what happens. That's why you have to have a vision, a lens through which you are looking at things. Because if you don't know where you're headed, you don't know what decisions to be making, what boundaries to be putting into place. Here's the thing nobody ever talks about not having a boundary. Not having boundaries leads to resentment, leads to burnout, and you can crush your own business under the weight of everybody else shoving your boundaries around. Every business needs to have a succession plan on day one. Without boundaries, how will your business function when it's in crisis? If you don't have a succession plan, if you don't have a vision, if you don't have what the future could look like, should look like, what you want it to look like, what direction you're going, you're never going to know what boundaries to put in place. But worse yet, when crisis happens, you're not going to have a way to handle that. Boundaries is what keeps your business healthy. Boundaries is what keeps you healthy, your family healthy. Don't let not having boundaries be the thing that comes in and crushes your business to a pulp. Put the boundaries in place. Take the time to do it. Because whether it's an election, whether it is an economic crash, whether it is an overbearing mother-in-law, whether it's a sick child, whatever it is, there is going to be things that come. There is always going to be world tragedies, unfortunately. There is always going to be trolls online. We have to have the boundaries in place for ourselves, for our mental health, for our business in order to keep going. But nobody can set a boundary for you. I can't tell you what boundary to set. The only thing I can tell you is figure out what you want. Figure out where you're headed. What are you trying to build? And then make decisions based on that. If you're looking to build a luxury travel business, then don't just flood your marketing with $2.99 trips to Vegas. You want to make sure that everything you're doing fits within the lens of the vision you're setting. Give yourself that boundary. When you have a personal, professional boundary of the type of business you want to build, it also lets you to stop chasing the low-hanging fruit and going after the quick win rather than giving up the long win. Find your boundaries. Put them in place. And until next time, happy selling.